Welcome back to another episode of the Working Joe's podcast with me, Zack, and my co-host, Ralph Wolf. And don't forget to download the podcast on Android using Stitcher or Podcast Addict, or if you have an Apple phone, use iTunes. Welcome back to the Working Joe's podcast. We are stretching across the phone this time. And I have Ralph with me on the other side of, well, the southeast, I guess, at his job site.
Yep, I'm working.
What are you doing?
I am doing a 4-ton condenser and a coil.
Oh, my gosh. Well, how's it going? How much is left now?
Well, I just have to finish up the ductboard transition. Thank God for ductboard. While I'm doing that, I'm letting the vacuum being pulled. And then I just have to wire up the outdoor unit and open the valve.
Oh, that sounds so simple and easy.
Well, yeah, it does, except now I'm on the hard part of the transition because I have a bunch of flex coming down the side of the furnace, and I have to make an angled piece. So it's going to be hard to reach back in the back and get it all sealed up. But, hey, you know what? Small steps for a stepper like myself.
That's right. Well, that's good, man. You know, we're talking to Trey tonight from EWC.
Oh, Trey is great.
It was super fun. It was great.
Yeah. If you meet a guy like Trey in your lifetime, you've done well.
That sounds really special.
If you're fortunate enough to meet him twice, you're really living.
That's pretty good. Well, the expectation is high now. So and he meets the expectation. He does a good job.
Yeah. He really is excited about what he does. I mean, I don't know. There's guys out there that are really excited about what they do, but Trey really, really shows it. In any of the other reps from other manufacturers that know him, they'll tell you there's nobody else like him.
I've never met anything like him in my whole life.
And it's a shame that the guys can't actually see like his reactions to things. Like you were saying, when he gets excited about things, he's up close to the screen, and you could tell that he's excited about it.
Yeah, you're right.
You're passionate about it.
Yeah, I think the best thing for people to do would be to pause the podcast right here and then go to Google and search for Trey Miller Vikings fan and find the picture, and then use that picture in your mind when he's describing zoning products. That guy, except instead of painted in purple, he has EWC written on his forehead or something like that.
Yeah. At least his shirt. But no, but Zack is for real. Just stop the podcast. If you haven't done it, go to Google and type in Trey Miller Vikings fan. And it's just so you'll see what we're talking about. Yeah. And he shows that passion towards his job, and I guess towards life in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was really a great guest, and we're going to have him on again because he's so much fun.
Yeah, we talked about the bypass quite a bit, but like you said, we didn't touch on the zone boards except for mentioning them just in passing. It's really mostly about bypass stuff. Right.
We didn't talk about hardly any of the dampers. I mean, we did. We talked about the, was it 14 pounds of torque on the dampers. But that was, I've heard that in the classes, every class I go to. So I already knew that, but I mean, it's I don't know what else to say about Trey.
Well, it was a lot of fun talking to him. You really don't see guys that often because it's just like you describe guys from our business who go to work and come home and don't give a crap. You can tell that's not Trey, man. He goes to work and he talks about bypass dampers with such passion.
He talks about bypass dampers like somebody talks about their firstborn. When their kid is born for the first time, they're showing pictures and they're just all excited. And nothing wrong with that. But that is how passionate he is about what he does.
Yeah, and EWC in general, because by the time we were done, I was afraid to say I used EcoJ. I didn't know what was going to happen. By the
Right.
time it was done, because he felt so strong about it, he said, I don't feel this strong about EcoJ. I just use them.
Right, exactly. But we did talk about the customer service in the interview with Trey, and that's something I don't think we stress enough about EWC. Their customer service is, I mean, they'll pick up on the first ring a lot of times, and part of that is because that product is so good, it hardly ever breaks. So they have the time,
Yeah.
So they're just sitting around waiting for people to call.
Yeah, not playing solitaire on their computers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Playing on Facebook and that kind of stuff. But no, I'm just joking about that. But those guys have been there for many, many years, and they, when you do call, you do get the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, you're right. I called them and I got my answer within about 2 minutes, and it was correct. I mean, it wasn't just an answer; it was the right answer.
They know the product. They know the product like the back of their hand. I mean, you know what, Zach? We keep talking about how great Trey is, but why don't we let the guys see him? But before we do, let's remind everybody, if you have any comments, if you know of anything you want to talk about or what we didn't talk about with Trey, go to the Working Joe's YouTube channel and leave a comment.
That's right. It's so easy to do. A lot of people, I don't care if it's I hate it, I love it, anything that is going to help us in some way or another, short of you guys all suck, period, go ahead and leave a comment.
Well, I can guarantee you, they might say, you two that talked in the beginning, y'all suck, but that guy that talked most of the time, bring him back so we don't have to listen to you guys no more. I hope we can get some more guests on there. Like, if people listen to this one, the guys that we want to bring on, if they listen to how we pump Trey up, they may not want to come on.
Well,
for fear of being a letdown.
I don't know about that, but I can see how people would listen to Trey and go, man, I don't feel this good about everything I do. I don't know about this, but you know what? We like all types on here. Trey's just a special kind of dude. He brings a lot of vibrance, a lot of life to everything, which just makes it more compelling.
I say that, but look at Dave when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
But Trey may have him just a step ahead of him.
Here goes Trey Miller from EWC. We're going to talk to him in 2 different podcasts. This is part 1. Make sure to catch part 2, which will be next Tuesday morning. It should be very exciting. And without further ado, here is Trey Miller. We're with Trey Miller from EWC. Trey, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at EWC and tell us a little bit about EWC itself.
Well, EWC is a forced air zoning manufacturer. We're the original forced air zoning manufacturer. As a matter of fact, we have now discovered we are the oldest forced air zoning manufacturer in the world. We started it back in like 1964. We were basically a manufacturer for Honeywell, or it was really Trolatemp at the time. Trolatemp discovered a damper, made a rectangular damper, came to EWC, can you build it? We said yes, but up to that time, we had been doing a lot of custom work for the military and the government. We built the majority of the transformers, a lot of controls for the stealth fighter, Apache helicopters, Abrams tank, and we also been working with NASA since the early 60s. And that's the type of company we were, predominantly transformers and controls. And then, but we had a manufacturing facility. Trolatemp asked us if we could build the damper. We said yes, and that's how it all started back in 1964, as far as dampering systems, forced air dampering systems.
Well, that was incredible. So it started out military-based.
Military, that was what we did as far as EWC. And then we kept doing that. We just sold that probably about, I guess, 8-9 years ago. Because if you looked at the specs on a stealth fighter transformer, it's like 1.5 inches thick. I'm like, what can you write documentation on a transformer there? I started reading through it. It was ridiculous, and the government doesn't pay really good, so it takes a year to get paid. So they just said the heck with it, And plus now we're OEM, and we've kind of become the zoning company for the whole industry now. I mean, we make the dampers for Goodman. We make the boards, dampers, and controls for Goodman, Daikin, and Amana. We make the dampers for Train. We make the dampers for Carrier. We make the boards, dampers, and controls for Rheem. So it's kind of like, and we OEM'd all those guys. You know, we make all that stuff for them too.
It's funny you say that you're the OEM manufacturer for all the Train, Carrier, Lennox, and all those. But nobody really knows. Like if you ask guys, like in our groups, a lot of them have never heard of EWC.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, we're a nice little silent manufacturer, just like we were the silent manufacturer for Trolatemp and Honeywell.
Right.
Until Honeywell went on their own. Of course, that was the thing that kind of frustrated me a little bit. Is that I am working. All of a sudden, I got bought by Honeywell. Then all of a sudden, they're saying we're moving all of our stuff to Mexico, China, and Canada. And I said, oh no. It's hard enough to get guys to balance airflow properly. You got to do it with good equipment. You can't make it cheaper. We need better stuff to make it easier for the contractor to make it work, so we don't have the service problems that people are accustomed to with zoning that's installed improperly.
Right. Now, if you had a group of 10 guys and they would say, and you ask them, what zoning do you prefer? And number one answer would be Honeywell. Because that's what guys know. But they don't understand.
They don't know the difference.
There you go.
And there's a big difference because that's all they've seen. And that's part of my problem is getting the word out to everybody. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, put my damper up against any damper in the industry, and I mean, nobody's even close. I mean, 18-inch pound torque motor, LEDs, power open, power closed, timing sequence to match your ECM motor response time, which is imperative. That was one of the main reasons ACA came to us and used us to help them write manual ZR. Was because all of our product worked with the existing equipment. You got a response time of an ECM motor, and now all of a sudden you have a damper open in 3 seconds. All of a sudden, the ECM motor sees a reduction in airflow. So all of a sudden now it tries to ramp up. Then the bypass reacts, and you're doing this constantly with those type of products. Yet with ours, all of them moving at the exact same timing sequence, the ECM motor never knows it even has zoning on it. And that was the main goal, I think, that we were trying to achieve with ACA, is that if we can keep the equipment so it doesn't even know it has zoning on it, then you actually have a more efficient unit because pre-cooling, preheating the coil, and there's no detriment to it at all. That's the nice thing. You lower the amp draw, you unload the compressor, you actually are doing a good thing for the equipment. But if it's installed improperly, with little toy cranky hand bypasses and stuff like that, that has one set point, can't work for everything.
Yeah, because that when the guys see, well, Honeywell's out their static pressure damper, and you crank it up to like a half an inch, and I try to explain to them why that's not really.
Well, let me tell you, we have now come out, and we took 2 years to develop it, but we wanted to develop something that works. We developed a CLBD, a constant load bypass damper, which is very similar to Honeywell's, except a lot more accurate. Because the problem with Honeywell's is it just floats. So any type of increase in airflow is going to open the blade to a certain extent. Now they're trying to say that they're maintaining a 0.5-inch static. That's not even possible. What ours has is a magnet. The damper shut until it reaches a 0.5, then it will open, or a 0.4, 0.3, whatever you set it at. So we have that to work it in that direction. That way you're not constantly bypassing. You're actually keeping the pressure in the ductwork until you exceed the pressure that you set.
But that's not the SBD that I installed the other day on that.
Oh, no. No, yeah, the SBD is a whole different ball game.
Right.
But I've been doing this for plus 30 years. I've been waiting for the SBD forever.
Oh, I love it.
It's just it answers all your questions. I mean, the problem that you have with some of these guys is price. And then when you get into, I'm putting in 2,000 new homes. That's why I'm saying we have something to compare to which was against what I wanted to do. But anyway, I mean, we wanted something that it would at least make zoning work better, because with a barometric bypass, which I don't like at all, never have, I haven't promoted barometric bypasses in 18, 20 years. So especially since you have the electronic, because maintaining the static is, to me, the key to the airflow. I mean, imagine having a little Phillips head or screwdriver on your air handler and being able to increase your static or reduce your static. That'd be pretty nice, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we can do with your bypass. Maintain it. Design static.
So you have two bypass dampers, two electronic bypass dampers. One of them that I saw Ralph use has two static pressure taps for the return of supply, and one of them uses a magnet that holds it into place until the static reaches that point. Is that correct?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Inevitably, we do have two electronic bypasses, but both of them are electronic and have 24 volts attached to them. The constant load bypass damper that I was talking to, and I just brought that up because we were talking about the little Tonka toy thing Honeywell has, which
Jack in a box. Jack in a box. Get it straight. Jack in a box.
Jack in a box. Okay.
Crank.
That's the key to the whole system. That's what diverts the BTUs. That's what maintains the static. That's the most important thing in the whole system, and it's got to be better than a little Tonka toy. I mean, that damper's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Ralph said you were a passionate man, and that works out well for our podcasting, so we like that.
Yeah.
I was radio, right?
I've ran into a lot of different manufacturers reps and a lot of guys that run into, that work for the manufacturers and tech reps and stuff like that. And Trey, by there's nobody that even comes close to Trey. I've probably sat through about 15 of his classes. And now,
oh my God.
Speaking of class, I'm serious. I've probably been in more of his classes in Atlanta than anybody else. And speaking of classes, you say you have 9 states that you do classes in, right? That you take care of. What is your job at EWC?
I'm the Southeast Regional Manager. I cover from Florida up to North Carolina, over to Arkansas, down to Louisiana. It's a whole corner of the country.
So do you ever make
And my job is I have manufacturers reps who work with me, like y'all have Leonie Green.
Yep.
And they do a phenomenal job of getting the classes set up and, getting the basic training set up. And I would consider myself a trainer, because that's the thing. If people understand how this works, and y'all have installed them. I mean, my gosh, if nothing else, every night you go to bed, you keep your bedroom comfortable, cut the rest of the house off or back. I mean, it's a common sense thing, but it's just education.
Right. Now, what is the first line of your class that every class I've been in, you've used this for many years. I've gone back, I've sat in your classes going back probably since the late 90s, actually.
Yeah. I've been with EWC for 17 years.
Yeah, so I've been using that product for a long time. So as long as you've been with them. No, you say you've been with them 17 years.
And I was with Honeywell before. I was supposed to be national sales manager for Honeywell Zoning. I mean, I went to Minnesota and they gave me the job and the whole 9 yards, but then they told me they were moving everything to Mexico, Canada, and China. And then it was not a good thing.
Right.
It was like they wanted me to run the whole show, and they wanted me to train people that had camera degrees, photography degrees, just people pulled out no background in HVAC at all. And zoning, you have to understand airflow, path least resistance, static pressure. These are things that if you can't help the contractor install it properly the first time, then it really puts the contractor disadvantage. And if he has problems with it, guess what? He walks away because
he will never
life's too short to run into a bunch of problems. Exactly.
Never sell. And he'll say,
which I don't blame him.
Right. He'll say it's a piece of junk. You don't want that. And I've used zoning for a very long time, since I've been in the business. And I think my first brand I ever put in, and I would never ever put another brand in. And Zack can tell you which brand that is. It's not Honeywell. It's another brand. The worst one on the market.
Ralph.
California Economizer?
No. I actually did that one a long time ago. Ralph did April Air.
What'd you say?
April Air.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. The worst.
He ran off. He left because you said that, Ralph.
April.
No. I was reaching over. I mean,
I remember California Economizer. Something like Zone First was one of the ones we first saw. Something like that.
you know, this is a thing. Zone. It was called California Economizer, and at the time, well, it really wasn't Honeywell. It was Dick Foster, and it was Troll Attempt, but they had no bypass. So, I mean, California Economizer was the first guys to come out with a bypass with a leave-in air temperature sensor. The only problem is they left the circuit board exposed to the airflow, and then you get a little bit of cooling and heating and dust, and it shorted out in about 6 months, which was not very good. But the bypass made so much sense because you could use it in retrofit applications. The way Honeywell was training back in the day, basically you had to redo the ductwork in size every run for 70% of the airflow. So it was basically limited to a 2-zone system or maybe 3-zone, which without the bypass, I mean, you lose all the advantages. I mean, it's really not even worth it without the bypass.
It's so odd to hear you say, talking about the bypass, and I went to American Standard classes, and they're saying that their stuff is designed so you don't need a bypass. You should never use a bypass. It's just so crazy because that's the first time I've ever heard that before.
ACA will tell you the bypass is key to the whole thing.
Right.
I mean, there are other ways to bypass, and now with some of this high-fangled equipment, I mean, sure, you can drop the fan speed down to 20%. We can drop our capacity down to 20%. But now you tell me, y'all been in heating and air a long time. I got a little problem with ductwork size for 100% airflow, and I'm only blowing 30% airflow through it. It's kind of like it's going to condense before it ever gets to the daggone. Oh, and I've asked I do training with these guys, and I ask them that, and they're like, it just doesn't happen. I'm just like,
it does. Look. I'm gonna raise my hand because I have a inverter, and
I want to go next. I have a story.
Yeah, and I do have.
Please talk to me.
And I do have sweating ductwork on when mine is in low stage.
It makes sense. I mean but you see, with zoning, the beauty of it is we're not opening all zones. So we can keep that low fan speed, that low capacity going to particular areas, and our run times will be cut shorter so we don't run into that scenario. So
Right.
Zoning with these systems are phenomenal. But what I don't understand is putting them in without zoning.
Well,
That's what I was going to say. How can you have a
Right.
fully communicating variable speed system that has this ductwork that's sized for 100% of the possible airflow, and then when you have a run that's 300 total effective feet farther away, how's it possibly going to get air when it's at 20% when it's not zoned?
That's what I'm trying to figure out myself. But they keep working on them, and they're coming out with new ones. Dream's coming out with a whole new line to EcoNet, and we're making a board and stuff for them, which, makes sense to me as far as that's concerned. But, of course, with the mini splits and all that fun stuff, they just took off, and everybody looking at inverter compressor technology is the thing. And I understand it. I got you. On a mini split, yeah, it makes sense because you don't have ductwork.
Right.
But on split systems, we have ductwork. It's a little different. I mean, I don't know. And here again, I'm not an engineer, so all I know is that put my stuff on these systems and they work like they're
Hey, look, I have EWC dampers on my inverter on my 5-speed, and I will tell you that the thing for me with my 5-speed is the humidity removal, and it cost me about $3 a day to run my system. So that was a thing with zoning for me. I mean, with the inverter for me.
Sure. Oh yeah.
But now you talk about EWC being ACA compliant. Y'all helped write the book with them, didn't you?
ACA went around. They interviewed all the manufacturers of zoning. Now, granted, that's our main thing is zoning, but so were some other people and Troll Attempt, things like that. But we were the only ones that all of our dampers had the same timing sequence and our bypass. So we were about as close as any. I mean, we're way more closer than anybody else as far as balancing the airflow to make this thing work. And so we were at it from the get-go. ClimateTalk technology. ClimateTalk was an inverter system or communicating system protocol. It was an open protocol. That started about 8 years ago. But right before that, we were working with ACA, and they were just trying to find out about zoning because, of course, they wanted to look into the proper way to install zoning. So they interviewed all the people, talked to everybody. Then they got with our engineer, John Brown. And John Brown, oh my God, this guy is phenomenal. I mean, I've been working with him, and I mean, he's forgotten more than I know. And I mean, he's so knowledgeable. Every time I talk to him, I learn stuff. And I mean, it's just, and that's one of the reasons we're successful as we are too, because when people call in with problems, boom, he not only tells you how to solve the problem, but then he gives you all the answers to why you were supposed to solve the problem from the get-go. He's really good. But he started working with ACA, and it was a great relationship. And they studied airflow. And we started looking at why we would have problems with systems that had bypasses on them, because the bypass was bypassing too much air, too cold, cycling on limit problems. How do we eliminate them? Well, we found out the majority of the time that the bypass was a path of least resistance. First takeoff, one of the shortest takeoffs,
Right.
and probably one of the largest takeoffs.
Right.
So all the air wants to go down path of least resistance. So when we found that out, if we could increase the equivalent foot of the bypass run, now, of course, what I always told y'all, and you remember in my classes, take it as far back as you can. Use a mixing box,
Right.
turning vanes, scoops, whatever you can do to slow that air down. And we did it for years and didn't have a lot of problems. But
temper the air.
now, if I can maintain, that's what this SBD does, which pretty much answers your questions. If I can maintain constant design static through the system, that means the design static that your ductwork and your equipment are using with no zoning, all zones calling, and we're going to capture that static and maintain it for the life of the system in any scenario. First stage, second stage, heating, cooling, any zone combination. With the timing sequence, working in conjunction with the variable speed motor, you've got a Cadillac system.
Yeah, because I mean, if you watched on the video, you could watch that damper as the air changed inside the system.
Yes.
You can watch that.
That's what I really liked about that too.
Yeah.
You even said 10 seconds, which I was impressed. I was like, this guy's done his homework.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and it only took me one class.
Well, that's all I've been able to do.
Hey, I know.
Man, you know, it's funny though, distributors, they're like, I don't think we need to stock these.
Oh, no.
It's funny getting the distributors. I've had some problems with some guys. Now, once the guy comes back and they say, man, this is all I'm going to use and it's all over. But It's funny how some of them are very resistant. It's just another product. It's just another thing. And
No.
And of course, you know, everybody's on this mini split barrage. But I mean, do you put in a lot of mini splits?
I try to put in as many as I can.
I don't put in very many. No.
Well, they have their place. They do have their place. I have a little.
Oh, no question. But for the cost of the disconnect and the outdoor unit, I can zone the entire home, not one room.
Right.
That's my whole problem.
Now.
One question I had about the damper,
Yeah.
the blade inside of the damper that Ralph put in, the new static damper.
Yes.
Why is the blade shaped like that? It has two semicircles coming off of it. Is it for turbulence or what is it for?
That's the key to the whole thing. What that is. Now, remember, back 3 years ago, and we had this problem with the bypass. We realized that if we put restriction in the bypass, other than the modulating supply damper, that's going to be, well, not supply, but modulating bypass damper, that was electronic running on static pressure. If we put restriction in it constantly, then we could increase the equivalent foot of the bypass run. And if we don't get the, let's say, 5-ton unit, 2,000 CFMs from the bypass, we're getting it from the return. Whatever we don't get from the bypass, we're getting from the return. Restrict the bypass, pull more return air, better mixture, the whole 9 yards. Those opposed blades we did in plexiglass plenums are the same as the hand damper and the electronic bypass put in one component.
Right.
So you don't have two components now. You only have one. And when that modulates, it actually swirls the air. So when the air hits the return, instead of it being an air curtain and a blanket shot straight down on the ductwork, it swirls with the air going right towards the equipment. Mixture is second to none, and that's the whole thing we've been trying to do forever, is mix the air, the bypass and return air. And this does it perfectly. And with one component. Of course, that was part of the reason it took so long to develop. and get all the micron sizes of the blades and everything put just right, so that we could make sure that the mixture was proper.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, Trey, the hand dampers, even though it was in the instructions, I can guarantee you a lot of people didn't do it.
Oh no!
Because they were like,
oh no!
I don't believe that would work.
Well, it did. It did work, and I saw a lot of systems. I went out and I just solved the problem, plain simply the hand damper, because the bypass was just getting too much air, too big a bypass. Guys will turn around and say, "Well, my biggest run is 16 inch, so I'm gonna put a 16-inch bypass on there." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, 16 inches for a 7.5 ton unit."
Right.
I mean, it's like, especially connected from supply to return, because you have that double static.
Well, I never sized them like that. I always kind of size them a little different, because I realized a long time ago in my eyes and my brain that it's always going to be the shortest run, and the push-pull effect was going to actually, even though, let's say I did a 10, it was going to actually be more like a 12 because it was so close.
Right.
It was pushing. Well,
because you're right. You're double static. We're sizing the bypass at a 0.3.
Right.
Not your 0.1 or your 0.08 on your supply. Definitely. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I always undersize them a little bit compared to what everybody else is doing.
Well, the whole thing is, if you undersize it, all you have to do is bleed a little air, and that'll help you get out of that too. And that's another thing that I think I've spent a lot more time on training too. Guys have to realize, when you're in a single stage equipment scenario, your smallest zone CFM is 40%, 35%. So that's not a bedroom without bleeding.
Right.
So look at the CFMs. Look at the CFMs that you want in your small zone. Take your 35% of your total, subtract it, and plain and simply find what the difference is between your small zone and your required 35% zone, and bleed that somewhere in the home.
Right.
Garage, the biggest room, the biggest zone in the home, a little, 15% bleed, 20% bleed. You're not going to feel anything. But don't bleed every zone. You don't need to bleed all zones 20%, because if you bleed a bedroom, you could run into an overcooling scenario.
Right.
But I mean, you can still, and I mean, the engineers will say bleed all zones a little bit. Negative. I mean, I've had it in my house for 20 years, and I've never, I do it the way I train on doing it, and it works.
Right.
So it's almost like having like a little dump zone area.
Well, yes, but only do it when you have to, because we don't want to flood it with cold air.
Right.
We don't want to cycle on limit. That's our main problem, and that's where you hear guys, that's why they tape the bypass shut. Now, let's tape the bypass shut. Therefore, we have no relief. All we do is back pressure on the blower, and we don't get the CFMs out of it either. Our head pressure goes through the roof, and our unit goes bad in 5 years.
Right.
There's some of your bad scenarios, and what guys will do to try to fix the problem when it doesn't fix it at all. We've got to maintain static through that equipment. And if we do, guys, we got a system that works. I mean, let me just tell you this. I did a study with Alabama Power. We took a normal 5-ton unit. Now, this is, good gosh, 15 years ago. We were dealing with a piston coil, fixed orifice. We put a 5-ton unit, ran it for half an hour. Average amp draw, 25 amps. Fixed orifice. We put it in a 50% bypass. Ran it for the same 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Average amp draw, 17. John, that's a 32% reduction in amp draw. A 32% increase in efficiency. That story back in the day was you put in an 8-seer, you got 12-seer. I mean, the thing is, with expansion valves, we're not going to give you the amp draw loss now. But we're going to meter. We're going to meter it down to where, guys, I'm going to increase your latent cooling effect. We're going to dry the air out like there's no tomorrow. In cooling, I mean, you come into my house, and I'm just funny because my son just moved in with me. And I tell the story all the time. I say, I keep my thermostat at 78 degrees. And people think it's cold. And he came and he says, man, you got to cut the thermostat back up to 78. I said, it is a 78. He's like, because, I mean, your proper dehumidification is the key to cooling. I mean, it makes you cold. I mean, it can get chilly.
Right.
But
absolutely. You have this piston unit. You have it zoned. The airflow is getting bypassed. The amperage is dropping. The superheat's dropping. And I guess the discharge superheat is dropping. Then you have amp.
Well, no,
amperage
you're not
dropping.
going. Like I say, with the expansion valve, you're not going to get the amp draw loss.
Right, but with the piston,
You're not going to get it with the expansion valve. With the piston, you would. There's no piston units out there anymore. Everybody's going with expansion.
Oh, there's still a couple.
There's still a few, but still, I mean, I you know, look at the what you get out of an expansion valve compared to a piston, and I'd go with an expansion valve all day anyway.
Right.
But I mean, you know, it's not a negative. I mean, it's just as far as the story, people understand amp draw better than they understand latent cooling effect.
Well, yeah.
this is true.
You can see it.
That's your. But the end result is you're comfortable. You don't have to have your thermostat at 72 degrees just to have some dryness in your air. I mean, all these things are what comes into play, and that's what makes us comfortable in cooling with shorter run times, colder air, and like I say, a much nicer latent cooling effect, which makes everybody much more comfortable in the cooling season, which requires less cooling.
Yeah. You get the humidity down, you get rid of, you know.
That's the whole key. That's the key to the whole thing. Humidity control.
So I know we touched on that SPD, but that is the best thing that come out in zoning
Ever.
besides
Nothing's
zoning
ever.
itself.
No, I mean, with all the problems and all the people who call me when they haven't put it in right or they put in a brand X system and they're having troubles, and how do I fix it and how do I solve it? Instead of what most people will do is rip it out.
Right.
When it's absolutely not, there's no need for that. You just have to balance the airflow.
Right.
But that's the whole thing. The bypass is the key. And if, like I say, balancing that, maintaining that design static at all times, and that's what its job is. It has a built-in manometer. That manometer is what we use in our industry to check static pressure. When you have a built-in manometer controlling the blade, maintaining the static with your supply tubes and return tubes that are installed in the ductwork, it's like having a service call on it all the time.
Man, I'll tell you
and
what.
It's always running properly.
That is I couldn't get over, because that was the first one I ever put in. It was. And I didn't know about it until we took the class the last time you were here. And I was like, man, that's going to be cool. And I finally got a situation where I could use it. And I was like, man, I cannot believe how simple this thing is. That bedroom area, he said, it used to sound like a plane was in my bedroom. And we went up there. And that was the only zone calling. And at the end of that video, you saw that damper didn't close all the way or open all the way. It still had a little bit left to go. And we went up there, and the noise was gone. He said, man, this is great. This is great. Yeah. So no more noise.
Well,
no more
it's going to sense that run is shorter and that it's getting a higher static, so it's going to open more.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the whole thing. Whatever the scenario is in your duct system, you're going to get it right as your air handler.
Right.
And we've got the two ports right there measuring that airflow and that static across that air handler. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
I was kind of worried about that that damper not being big enough. But it turned out, I was like, at the end when I saw that it wasn't open all the way, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I didn't have the room. You know what I mean? Because the worst.
Well, a lot of times you'll see, especially if your ductwork's not sized right, when you have all zones open, your bypass may still be open, may still be working.
Right. So
I mean, I've seen those before. Now with the new one, I have not seen that with the new one.
Right.
Because it's captured design static, but with the SBDs I used to. But I mean, the SBDs compared to barometric the EBDs that we had were great.
But now that this one is out, and there's not a lot of cost difference in between the EBD and the SBD.
No. It's the same price as the EBD, which was the older style, and a hand damper.
Right.
We combine the two of them, plus you've got a motor that's, that's the thing that kills me. My motor costs more than any one of my competitors' entire damper costs.
Right.
Just my motor.
Right.
I mean, we've just got a deal with Belimo. I mean, one of their largest users, and the fact that we had a little scenario about 12 years ago that wasn't very pleasant, and they have been making up for it ever since.
Yeah, so
We had a little blue motor scenario a long time ago, but they messed it up. Yeah, you were there. You were there during that. And I mean,
think
we
many
replaced
of them.
everything, did everything. But I mean, hey, things happen. But I mean, ever since then, that's really given us the star motor, because I mean that is a heck of a motor. You ever had a bad damper?
not
new one?
not the clear
No.
ones, not the clear.
No.
Now the blue ones.
No.
Well, y'all, it was.
Oh yeah.
Was it orange and then blue, or blue and then orange?
Yeah, we haven't even made the blue one. We haven't even made the blue one in 15. Oh,
It went from blue
12,
to
13
orange,
years.
right?
well, the orange was the step in between.
Right.
The
right.
orange was the ECM motor, but it just didn't have all our patented time and sequence and the LEDs and all that stuff.
Right.
So
right,
that we
right.
put all that. That's when we went to the clear. When we came out with that was a quick fix. Was the orange motor.
Right. And I
because-
don't know. I couldn't tell you how many of those motors I changed. I mean, I did change a ton of motors, but every manufacturer goes through some sort of hiccup.
Well, the whole thing is that we took care of it. I mean, that's why. Let me tell you, that was one reason why I'm still with EWC. I mean, the owner is phenomenal, Mike Riley, and I mean, he plain and simply put his foot down and said, "Hey, we're going to take care of every daggone job out there." He gave guys to put on the trucks. He paid labor allowances. Anybody who called us and let us know about that, we took care of it, and he paid a lot of money out. But I mean, hey. He stood behind the product, and it really was a Belimo problem, not ours. But he stood behind it 100%. And that's why I'm a lifer. I'll be with EWC.
Well, you're not the only one that's with EWC for life. I mean,
Oh, I know.
how many
gosh.
employees have been there for years, since the 60s?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that at EWC, I'm not sure the total number of employees, but the average employment there is like 25 years.
Good grief! All right.
I mean, that's for a manufacturing facility. That's pretty outstanding, really. I mean,
I like to see Honeywell's numbers now.
Oh yeah, really.
It won't be that way.
Maybe they'll do it in months.
Well, you got to realize Honeywell doesn't build anything. Everything is OEM'd. Ever since Allied Signal, this is what happened when I got bought. When Allied Signal bought Honeywell, they basically got rid of all the R&D, everything. They sent everything is made now in China, Mexico, and Canada. They put the Honeywell name on it and they sell it. That's how they're doing it. It's all OEM'd. I mean, look at that steamer. Well, I shouldn't be talking about this on the web.
Well, no, I mean, hey, actually, Trey, that's what this podcast is about. It's about letting guys know that, hey, these manufacturers do have problems, and that steamer is the worst steamer that anybody ever had.
Oh, Jesus.
The EWC steamer was great, but a lot of guys were like, "Oh, you stick that stainless steel in the ductwork and it blocks airflow and blah blah blah."
Oh, I know.
But
let me tell you, especially in today's society, support our American-made companies, and we're 100% American-made. And I mean, you look at these other guys, and everything's made over in China and Canada, and Mexico, and I don't know. I mean, how can I give you an 18-inch pound torque motor with the design of our damper, with the gasket assembly, everything's riveted? I mean, everything for the same price as they give you a synchronous clock motor with a little plastic gear in the thing. I don't know, man. I don't know. Y'all are making me say bad things.
No. Hey, the little rubber band belt was the worst design ever.
Kevlar. Wait a second. That's Kevlar.
It's Kevlar?
That's a Kevlar.
I thought
gear.
Kevlar wasn't supposed to break.
Well,
I'm
just telling you what it was. I'm not saying anything.
It'll break, but it's bulletproof.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
Well, I think that's the purpose of this podcast. Everybody knows what EWC does and that it's available.
And
all
why
these
they do
different
it
products are available. Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Working Joe's podcast. And make sure to tune in to part 2 next Tuesday, the 20th of June. Also, don't forget to leave a comment on our YouTube channel so we know what we're doing right, wrong, and we can improve each and every time we do one of these podcasts. You can download the podcast on Android by using Podcast Addict or Stitcher, or you can use iTunes if you're on an Apple phone or tablet.